What is the creepiest thing you've seen in the woods, or in the mountains, or in deserts, or caves, or in a small towns, or in remote or rural areas, or while on large bodies of water, or while on a aircraft or a nautical vessel? I was driving home after an extremely late night at work. I lived in the middle of nowhere. About a mile before I got there, a woman covered in blood jumped out of the woods into the middle of the road screaming. I panicked and went around her, then slammed on the brakes to help. Her boyfriend had beaten her and was currently chasing after her in the woods. I got her in my car and called the police. They met us at the hospital because I told them there was no way I was waiting on the side of the road when he was coming. Whoa, thank goodness you were there. I hope she got away from him after that. Went on a mountain hike in Transylvania with a group of friends from school, and way up, after maybe 12-14 kilometers of trekking, we saw a house. Was in the middle of nowhere. It had a barn, with a few animals, couple of cows, chicken, etc. As we get closer, we see a few people, a guy and 5-6 women. Not sure if there were more inside. The dude comes to greet us, barely speaking the language. We had a hard time understanding what he's saying. They lived without electricity, gas, anything. This is in the early 90s, so there's no internet, mobile phones to worry about. At least for most people. Anyway, they all looked weird. Kinda dumb expressions on their face. We can barely understand each other. They asked us who's the president now, and if we want some milk. They look at our clothes and shoes weirdly. Curious, like who knows when is the last time they had human contact. Or maybe there were more crazies around those parts. Dunno. Not sure to this day what was going on. It's not typical in the region. So we kinda freaked out, especially cause the dude looked a bit disturbed, and we were too young. We were looking around to see if there's more of them. Paranoia was getting to us, thinking there must be a village nearby. What was also weird is that all the women kept their distance, and never got close to us. Likely was guarding them, or checking us out, if it's safe for them. One of my friends kept saying we don't want their milk, and we need to go, cause it's getting dark. We walked calmly for a while. Then when we thought we're out of their sight, bolted like crazy out of there. Needless to say, we camped after a few hours, and we always had one person awake to keep watch. We told people that were living in the villages near that area about the mountain people, and they didn't believe us. They said nobody lives there, up in the mountains. When I was really young, we were on a family trip and me and my older brother took a ride on a boat. I remember my mom telling us to avoid the big floating thing. She thought it was a buoy to signalize a dangerous rock underwater or something. Being kids, of course we went straight there to explore it. So turns out it was not a buoy. That was a body of a tourist that went missing a week ago, as the police informed us a few days later. Creepy thing is he was one of a group of people that had disappeared together. I believe they never find the rest. So, not a good childhood memory. I was driving through rural parts of Missouri with a buddy. We drove down a single lane road that had no exit. At the end of the road, there was a group of deer corpses laid in a perfect circle. I'd say there was at least 10 deer. We BTFO real quick. Found a deer with its hind end ate up. Few feet away was a coyote with the hind end ate up. Then another few feet away a fox with its hind end ate up. Nothing else was there. No bullet holes or signs of an arrow or anything else. Couldn't find any tracks from other people or animal. It was pretty creepy. Found in the hills of WV. I'm not superstitious at all, but there is some weird crap always going on in the Appalachians. I'd been at football training with a few of my cousins when I was about 10 years old. We decided to take a walk before our parents picked us up, so we went along the canal towpath. My cousin looked down in the canal and saw a really nice jacket floating along, and being a weird scavenger person decided to reach in to fish it out. Well, the jacket turned over, and so did the man wearing it. He also had no face left. Not gonna lie, that was rough. Me and a friend decided to take our 4x4s and go camping in the mountains. I wake up middle of the night because I need to take a pee. So I put on my headlamp and I walk a bit further from camp, and as I'm doing my business, I hear rocks ruffle behind me as if they're being walked on. Anxiety rises. I finish up and turn around, and as my headlamp faintly lights up the area around me, all I see eyes. about 20 of them, and just staring at me. My breathing stops and I literally freeze where I'm standing. And then I hear a Maya. Goat blessed. It was a freaking herd of mountain goats that were intrigued by the ape in their backyard. Almost gave me an aneurysm. This is probably less scary than a lot of the other posts, but I was pretty sure I was going to be the nameless victim at the start of a horror movie to show how dangerous the monster is. Basically, my dad and I were walking through the woods when we came across a young moose leg lying on the ground. It looked like it had been violently torn off with no sign of the rest of the moose anywhere. It was fresh with blood still on the wound, probably no more than a couple hours old. My dad is a pretty skilled hunter, so he handed me his axe that he was carrying and told me to watch for wolves while he started looking for tracks. After a little bit he came back saying, "That's weird, normally if it was wolves you'd be able to find paw prints, but I can't see any. Also no bear prints, so I have no idea what killed this." And so I'm like, "You didn't find any tracks at all?" And his very reassuring response was, "Well, I did find what appears to be the mama moose tracks headed this way," showing me the tracks. "You can see how her stride is a lot longer here. Whatever killed her baby, she didn't want to fight it, she just took off running." He then pulls out his bear spray and holds it at the ready as we kept walking deeper into the woods with the unnamed non-track leaving predator armed with bear spray and an axe. I work as an autopsy technician. It's pretty regular happening and doesn't faze me now, but the first time I heard a remains exhale moan was pretty creepy. I'm a funeral director, and the first time I heard this I dang near quit. My boss told me it was just him saying I was doing a good job. There's a section of Joshua Tree National Park called Samuelson's Rocks where an old Swedish prospector who lost his mind used to live. He carved all sorts of crazy sayings into the rocks. During the day they look pretty neat. At night in a lightning storm they look like something of a Lovecraft. I am a night owl, so used to stay up late at the computer lab on my university campus. It was open until 2 AM. I was walking home and there were about 4-6 people covered in burlap robes and giant hoods, sitting cross-legged on the quad. The next morning, those suckers were still there. It was a chicken wire and burlap freaking art piece. I was mountain biking in the woods and I came across an East Asian looking man in a perfectly fitted suit and a briefcase, just casually walking through the woods. Cowlitz River, Washington State. Camping with my dad and sister, me buddies. Early 90s. Something was throwing rocks and sticks into our camp. We shined a flashlight out and caught a reflection of eyes and a silhouette. Very tall. Kept throwing stuff in our camp randomly for about 15 minutes. We just stoked the fire really high. In the morning I woke up to heavy footsteps in our camp and something reeked. Woke up my dad. He shook the tent and yelled. Whatever it was ran off. Human retinas don't reflect light back at night. That's a fun little fact I like sharing around the campfire. My girlfriend and I were hiking along some abandoned railroad tracks and we get to a small bridge going over a little creek. I'm about to go explore under the bridge when she points something out. I look over and in the woods across from us I see a guy. I'm like whatever and keep headed down to the creek area, and then the guy stands up and he's naked. We immediate backtrack pretty quickly to get away from there, and once we're like 1 minute down the trail I look back and this naked dude is just standing in the middle of the trail watching us walk away. I was a cook on board several NOAA research ships. Up in the Bering Sea, I saw what appeared to be a massive, black, triangular shaped craft dive under the water. I viewed it from a distance of maybe 2 nautical miles. I was on a camping trip with some friends of mine and we found like 7 or 8 chipmunks and squirrels all in a pile, but they were all dead without arms or legs. Possibly victims of glue traps that someone discarded. Some glue traps are strong enough to tear off rodents' limbs. Hopefully they were dead before someone unstuck them. A little bit better thought than the serial killer hypothesis anyway. In a patch of trees off of a field near where I keep my horse there's one of those big oil drums sealed up with a very heavy boulder on top. The only way it could have got there is being placed by a tractor or some sort of heavy lifting equipment. My partner and I tried to push it off but no luck. I don't know why, but it creeps me out every time I see it. I regularly walk my dogs past it to see if they show any interest, but honestly after watching them look for a toy that was clearly in my lap I'm not sure I have much faith in them anymore. Update: thanks to everyone who commented. You all made me realize that it could be something a bit creepier than I first thought, so I've reported it to 101. The officer I spoke to didn't sound particularly interested, but at least I know it's out of my hands and I don't have to live with guilt if something is found. I intended on getting up there myself yesterday to have a look, but I had a pretty brutal physio session that left me pretty much incapacitated for the day. I'm off up tonight after work, so hopefully if the police haven't got there before me I might still be able to take some pictures for everyone. I thought my better half had taken a photo of it before, but I can't seem to find it in her phone. Anyway, thanks again guys for putting the fear in me and making me do the right thing. This was quite a few years ago now, but me and my friend had this really cool spot to hang out, in the woods. You had to walk in the middle of a creek for a km and duck through sharp bushes and thistles. The hike was well rewarding though. The spot was about half an acre big. It was pure green grass on an incline with beautiful clear water ponds everywhere. There was tons of wildlife and the butterflies lived there, so there was always tons of butterflies. So the story begins on the way to this place. My friend Levi and I were walking along the river on the way to the spot. It was in the middle of a valley and nobody else ever went down there. Suddenly Levi stopped moving and ducked into a bush. I did the same because I thought there must have been a large animal somewhere. I saw him staring up the hill and so I looked up too. There was two people standing at the top of the hill heaving back and forth a lifeless body. We watched as they threw the lifeless corpse down the hill as it bounced off the trees and eventually got stuck on a tree at the bottom. Then they took off. Me and him were terrified and I was shaking so badly I couldn't speak. So we decided to verify it was a real body. Levi got about 4 feet away before screaming, "It has nostrils. It's real. Run." So of course we take off running. And I glanced back to see the two people run back to the top of the hill. Me and him ran 2 kilometers through thick brush and trees to get away from them. The next day we were with his parents driving to town, and we saw like 10 fire trucks at the school closest to the forest. Terrified we told his parents, bawling our eyes out worried that we were going to get murdered. His mom started laughing at us and said, "They are training for search and rescue. That was a dummy that the fireman had to find." I never slept as good as I did that night. I like how Levi identifies a human body through its nostrils. So when I was 15, my friends and I liked to climb abandoned buildings. We found one down by the river, about 3 stories high and in pretty bad condition. I remember there were no stairs initially and we had to pull ourselves up. We climbed to the top via broken stairs after that. At the top was a small open room where someone was living. We walked in to look around and immediately noticed the walls were covered in pictures. Pictures of women tied up, naked, obviously in pain in all sorts of positions. Some appeared dead but they were from magazines. We never got out of a building and away from an area so fast. Looking back, it was probably just serious BDSM, but 15-year-old me dipped out. Walking on the beach with my boyfriend and we had walked to a giant rocky cliff to make it. Somebody was just gazing at the ocean, crying and shaking. Mind you, this is late at night, like around 9:30 p.m. We asked him if he was okay. He apologized and practically ran back down the cliff, away from the dangerous areas. My boyfriend and I watched him until he reached the public area and decided to call it a night. I'm pretty sure he was going to jump. You just might have saved that dude's life that night. I was walking with family when I was little and we came across a sheep's head. No body or blood, just a severed sheep's head on the path. It was the first time I noticed sheep's eyes have slit pupils and I think my first contact with something so gruesome. My friend and I were chilling in the woods one day back in high school and see a dog walking by, later followed by this kid. He looked troubled so we asked if he needed help. He obliged, telling us he was dog sitting for his friend and the dog got loose. So we spent a good hour following this dog and kid around, going deeper and deeper into the woods. Eventually I finally got the dog to come to me, but it wasn't wearing a collar so I wasn't able to get a hold. My friend and I look away for just few seconds to discuss strategy, and when we turned back around, the boy and the dog are both gone. It was like they completely vanished. Keep in mind it was autumn so any footsteps could be heard from quite afar, but it was just silent, not a single trace of them anywhere. Still don't really know what happened. Maybe they ran away real quick, who knows. Was definitely enough to creep us out though. There's a story behind this. Boy and dog lost each other in woods and both died, but now reunited with your help. Fear freed of their bond to the land and now up in heaven. Almost seems like a quest. In order to get back home from a popular kebab restaurant, I need to walk a short path through the woods. Along the way there is an extremely old abandoned partially collapsed chapel, and occasionally I'll stand there for a few seconds admiring it. It's quite beautiful in its own way. One day during winter season I decided to rest there for a minute, so I placed my kebab on the bench right next to the chapel and just stood there taking in the scenery. It was already rather dark and the woods were almost completely silent, but right as I was about to continue my walk I heard footsteps rapidly getting louder. It was a child running towards me, and as soon as it realized I was there it started to repeatedly scream, "Run! He is coming!" or variations of that same sentiment. I was a bit perplexed by the situation, so I watched the child run past me without moving an inch myself. It didn't take another second for a much more weighty pair of footsteps to appear. I could make out a silhouette in the distance which seemed to be their origin, and at that exact point in time I got really scared. As opposed to running, I decided to hide in the chapel next to the altar, and after tripping over an old broken chapel bench I reached my hiding place. The footsteps got louder and louder, but right as they approached the vicinity of the chapel they suddenly went silent. About 15 seconds of complete quietness had passed just for the words, "Oh you freaking idiot left your kebab on the bench," to break the silence. Turns out it was a resident of the very same street I inhabit. His nephew was visiting and he wanted to race him to the kebab stand. I don't know whether this was the right place to post this. Ultimately this is more stupid than creepy. Best story here, Imo. This took place in the Australian bush around 10/11 at night. I was 17, leading a staggered column of about 60 cadets to our detachment campsite. Due to light discipline rules, only myself at the very front of the group and the other flight commander at the rear had torches on. This was so that any vehicles coming along the trail could see us, and so that most of the cadets could maintain their night vision. We were camouflaged up and thus difficult to see at night. As we walked along I periodically looked to my sides and kept seeing what looked like dewdrops on the ground. Almost like tiny blue gems glinting in my torchlight either side of the road. I had to maintain my position in the formation, so I couldn't get a good look at what they were. However, after a while we stopped for a very brief break, and I took the opportunity to have a closer look. Walking over to the side of the trail I spotted a small cluster of the diamonds and focused my head torch on them. Rather than seeing diamonds or dewdrops or anything remotely pleasant, I instead saw a group of about 5 large spiders just crouching in the leaf litter and staring at me. They looked like huntsmen, which are about the size of an adult's hand. Sweeping my head around, I realized there were thousands of the things, all over the ground, some on the trunks of trees, and everywhere around me, glaring at the light affixed to my head. I had a very brisk walk back to the formation and attempted to play it cool while screaming in my head. Being a massive arachnophobe, I have no freaking clue how I managed to set up a tent and spend the next week in that cursed forest. I was in a large wooded area near my BF's home, with him, hanging out nearly at midnight. We had gone in pretty deep and it required a good amount of climbing. The closest path was maybe 5-7 minutes climbing down, so it was highly unlikely someone could be at that spot that time of the night, besides us. As we were kissing and stuff, he thought he saw a shadow move 20-25 feet to the left of us, climbing, but it stopped suddenly when my BF looked at it. He told me to be wary. In that exact moment we saw a dark figure climbing a little up but diagonally, like he tried to go directly above where we were. We didn't move and watched him till he closed the horizontal gap and was directly above us, maybe 15 feet of steep downhill thick forest. Then he began to come towards us. Without skipping a bit, my BF grabbed my hand and we almost ran downhill till the path. We made it in less than 2 minutes while still holding hands and listening to the man running behind us. We ran as fast as we could down the path and out of the forest, where there was a cafe and some basketball and tennis courts next to the wooded hill, and of course, people. As we realized we came really close to be mugged or worse, we vowed never to go there at night again. Almost got Zodiac colored. I was Boy Scout, camping with my group of older buddies and an adult leader in Yellowstone. We had been backpacking for 2 days and stopped in a beautiful little clearing at the bottom of some huge tree-covered hills. The sun started to set. We made a fire, and I began to climb up into the trees to dig a hole and fill it back up. You know what I mean. As I squat there, basking in moonlight and appreciating the glow of fire among the trees, I looked up to a ridge line a few hundred yards away where the moon was rising. And I crap you not, I saw a dang big cougar crest the hill and just watch our fire. It was likely no danger to me, but seeing that outline, that unmistakable shoulder crawl they do, was haunting. I watched it sit there for a good 15 minutes until I was called back by my worried buds. I pointed the cat out to them when I got done because it was still just watching us. Crazy. I went to Philmont and they told us if you see a mountain lion, it's been watching you for the past 2 hours. Thanks. So it wasn't creepy for me, but I used to live on a farm, 200 acres, and dirt bike riders used to come on our property. Well, one night at about 10 my dad heard them coming, so he got out of bed bare butt naked with his shotgun and ran towards them. I wasn't awake for this, but my brother was, and he said it was the funniest thing he's ever seen. Imagine a biker Viking naked man, dong swinging, with a shotgun running at you. Needless to say, they never came back after that. In Auburn, in 2008, it was Halloween and we googled haunted houses. I can't remember what the website was like or if there even was one, but it was like 45 minutes away. I know that it wasn't like a big attraction and we figured it was on someone's land and would be like a local deal. We drove out there at like 10 PM. This was before iPhones and GPS, so we had MapQuest directions. We ended up going down a pretty country road for a while with no streetlights, then turned down a legit dirt road that went through the woods. Pitch black. Went down it for like 10 minutes and finally saw an old house with a sign by the driveway that was handwritten and said haunted house. No other cars or lights or people anywhere. We pulled in the driveway and sat there for a second like, alright, this is fricked up, we should leave. All of a sudden an old pickup truck turned on about 15 feet in front of us facing us, lights shining right in our faces. It started driving towards us. Down their own driveway we backed out and peeled out. It followed us, like almost bumping our rear end, right on our tail down this pitch black dirt road in the middle of the Alabama woods. We were flipping our crap. It was Texas Chainsaw Massacre Hills Have Eyes stuff. He stayed out our tail blinding us and almost bumping us all the way back home until we got off our exit and he finally let us go. No idea who was driving. I always think what would have happened if we got out of the car when we were in that driveway. That was an avant-garde haunted house. It's easier than dressing up like a mummy and jumping out of a closet. I've mentioned it on here before, but I found the body of a murdered woman in the woods when I was 10. I was collecting cans to trade in for money and walked to a party spot in the woods and she was lying face down in the grass. This was in 1997 or so, and I found out a few years ago it's become the center of a local urban legend, and the story going around is quite different than what I experienced. It messed me up pretty bad for a while. While hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail, I was ready to quit for the night and saw a clear spot with no pine cones or sticks to remove. I assumed someone had cleared it before me, but when I stepped on the spot the earth sank like it had just been put there. I slept on the spot but pondered about it. The next morning it became clear that someone had dug up that spot and then covered it. I think I slept on someone's recent grave. Or on a covered poop hole. I was hiking in northern Quebec, doing some exploration work for geologists. The thing about northern Quebec is that it has forests, mountains, hills, pretty much all green, black and grey, except that in the middle of a forest we hiked through, we found this strange all yellow patch of grass in a perfect circle, about the diameter of a medium-sized house. It was almost perfectly flat too, caught us off guard. Maybe lightning struck there. Was walking beans one day and found 2 perfect circles in the field. Turns out it was lightning. Not sure if that explains the yellow though. Was working in a forest in East Africa for a while. Was getting seriously dark and we were hiking back to the car. The wind was quite strong but you could still hear some ruffling in the leaves, and as I turned around, I saw something quite big in the shrubs. It was a freaking leopard. I shrieked and some guy from the group shot into the air to scare the animal away. I am glad he didn't shoot the animal, but was still glad when the animal bolted out of there. I was walking my dog through the woods and she'd find the odd bone. Thought nothing of it, but then she ran towards a huge black sack and was going nuts for it. I opened the bag and it's filled with bones. Kinda frickin' weird, but I'm still like, okay, just be hunters around or something. But then I walk a bit further and start seeing more and more bags, then a huge cluster of them, at least 20 right there, all filled with bones. I decided my dog had a long enough walk after seeing that. Okay, so one time back when I was like 11, me and my friend were walking through the woods because he said he had something he wanted to show me. We walked down the path for a good 20 minutes until he suddenly started walking through some closely planted thin trees. Despite my confusion, I followed him until he suddenly stopped in a clearing and there was a round mud hut in front of us. He told me he was too scared to go inside, so I did instead. The floor was lower down than the floor itself and there was a little fire put in the center. It was surrounded by DIY wooden bench things. Although that was odd in itself, the real showstopper were the walls. Every inch of the mud walls were covered in animal skulls held up by wire. These would range from a small sparrow skull to a deer skull. It was a pretty neat sight, TBF. Outside of the hut was another small bench which had the phrase "where heaven and earth meet" carved into it. Cut to January of this year and me and my mum tried to find the weird voodoo hut again in the woods. While we did come across the hut, it had sadly been demolished and all but a few of the skulls had been taken. It just kinda looked like someone had jumped on top of it after stealing all of the skulls for the what I can only imagine to be some vulture culture collection. It's kinda sad it had to go, but I still remember like it was yesterday. You definitely saw the aftermath of one of those primitive building time-lapse videos from Facebook. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.